Spider-Man, Brand New Day will be released in theaters on July 31, 2026, only. Since the film has not yet been released in theaters, the following is a pre-release review analysis based on the official synopsis, trailers, posters, announced cast and crew, production information, and the ending to Spider-Man, No Way Home. It doesn't build a full plot, secret villain identity, ending, post-credit scene, or unconfirmed character role. One may lose a name, but never a responsibility. That's the weird status quo that Peter Parker walks into Spider-Man, Brand New Day. At the end of No Way Home, the world didn't just forget Peter Parker was Spider-Man. It forgot about Peter Parker. Friends, teachers, enemies, institutions, and digital records no longer attached themselves to the young man who had spent years trying to protect them. The spell had saved reality, but it had turned Peter into a human blank space. This is where the official marketing for Brand New Day begins. It's been 4 years. Peter is no longer the teen trying to balance school, friendship, romance, and superhero work. He's a grown man living entirely on his own, fighting crime full-time in a New York City that doesn't know his name. Full-time Spider-Man sounds heroic until you think about what that means. There's no Peter Parker life to compete with the mask anymore. There may not be a Peter Parker life at all. That is the most promising idea in the movie. Every Tom Holland Spider-Man movie so far has put Peter in a web. In Homecoming he was tied to the school, Aunt May, Ned, the Avengers and Tony Stark's tech. In Far From Home, he was tied to a class trip, a romance with MJ, the memory of Iron Man, and a world that expected him to become something greater. Those ties turned dangerous in No Way Home. His identity was a danger to those he loved, and his attempts to fix it opened the door to alternate universes, dead villains, and other Spider-Men. Brand New Day flips that structure. Peter does not have many relatives nearby. He's characterized by their absence. The world may have forgotten him, but not he the world. Sony's official description says that's the film's emotional engine. Peter sees MJ and Ned living lives he's removed himself from. He remembers every conversation, every rescue, every promise, every loss. They don't conjure the same memories. The imbalance is cruel because it cannot be explained in a normal way. Peter can't just walk into a room and tell the truth. The truth itself has been magically cut off from all who once knew it. The upshot is that Brand New Day starts with a Spider-Man who has already taken the most extreme act of responsibility in his screen history. He avoided recognition. He abandoned intimacy. By his sacrifice, he lost the privilege of being thanked by those whose lives he saved. The risk is that the sacrifice can become an identity. Peter could tell himself that living alone is a noble thing, because it keeps others safe. He may see loneliness as proof that he is taking responsibility seriously. But fear can be a different kind of loneliness. No one knows him, and no one can be endangered through him. They can't challenge him, comfort him, argue with him, remind him he's more than the job. That's why full-time Spider-Man isn't always a good thing. Spider-Man has always worked best when Peter Parker's mundane life bumps up against the heroic one. Pay the rent, villain attacks, police are calling as a mate needs help, a rescue breaks up a job interview, love gets hard because the mask creates distance. The comedy, pain and humanity that Peter can't solve life by being stronger. If Brand New Day takes away most of that normal life, it has to ask what is left. The official synopsis offers up a disturbing answer. The pressure on Spider-Man builds and Peter goes through a shocking physical change that threatens to destroy him. His body, which has always set him apart, loses its stability. His powers are more than just reacting to danger. They may become a danger to themselves. This is an important step for a character who has tried to substitute a private identity for a heroic function. Peter's been becoming Spider-Man every hour of the day, but now Peter might be changing back. Physical transformation is often wish fulfillment in superhero stories. The weak body grows strong. An average person becomes quick, durable, and spectacular. In the case of Spider-Man, that fantasy has always been complicated by the fact that power brings guilt. Peter could have stopped the criminal that killed Uncle Ben. His powers are therefore tied to the realization that inaction can have lasting consequences. Brand New Day seems set to complicate the fantasy once again. What happens when the power feels unstable itself? What occurs when the hero's body begins to speak pressure that the individual refuses to recognize? The metamorphosis can be read as a physical metaphor of unprocessed grief. Peter has been wandering the city for 4 years with no known history. He hasn't forgotten Aunt May. He recalls the destroyed flat, the broken shield, the bad guys, the other Spider-Men, and that last decision in the coffee shop to not reconnect with MJ and Ned. The official story has not said he has recovered emotionally. It has only said he continued working. Sorrow can be delayed by work. It can't always hold it. The title Brand New Day suggests a fresh start, but the official synopsis insists that the old pain is very much alive. The price of the last picture has set a new standard for Peter. The day is fresh. The person going into it gets hurt. That tension is at the heart of the character of Spider-Man. He's one of the most optimistic heroes in pop culture, but his optimism is rarely based on having an easy life. He laughs as he falls. When his own plans fall apart, he helps strangers. He keeps moving, because if he stopped, he would have to look right at everything he can't fix. Tom Holland's best moments have always been where Peter's energy is masking fear. His Spider-Man talks fast, improvises, apologizes in fights, and attempts to turn panic into momentum. No Way Home brought that performance to grief and rage. Brand New Day can now show what those emotions look like after several years of silence. The 4-year jump is significant in that it prevents the film from treating the ending of No Way Home as a temporary inconvenience. Peter has had time to get into habits of being forgotten. He's probably learned how to rent a room, earn money, get around the city, and maintain equipment without the assistance of Stark resources or friends. The new life is not a first-night emergency. This is a system that works. That system may be functional, but not healthy. The new suit backs up this notion of self-reliance. The final scene of No Way Home had Peter stitching together a red and blue costume that moved away from advanced Stark machinery and toward a classic Spider-Man silhouette. Visually, the marketing for Brand New Day continues at Reset. The costume is brighter, more simplistic in its core identity, and more consistent with the traditional image of Spider-Man. It doesn't erase MCU history, but it does say Peter has remade the symbol with his own hands. A handmade suit is more than a nostalgic fashion statement. It changes the relationship between the hero and the equipment. Tony Stark's suits could provide information, surveillance, artificial intelligence, instant parachutes, and specialized web combinations. They made Peter look like he was part of a tech empire. He looks like a young man solving problems with minimal materials in a self-made suit. This is the Spider-Man that many viewers have been waiting for, not an apprentice Avenger, not a student lugging inherited machinery, but a hometown hero moving through New York because no one else is near enough to hear the call. Street level is a phrase that gets thrown around far too flippantly in superhero talk. It doesn't just mean smaller explosions. It makes it possible to understand consequences in human scale. A stolen bag is important because it's someone's rent money. A store is important when it's family-owned and it's damaged. A missing person is important before it becomes part of a cosmic event. A hero views the streets not as a battleground, but a neighborhood. Brand New Day was officially described as a mysterious pattern of crimes that creates a powerful new threat. That wording implies investigation, not imminent apocalypse. Peter may have to see connections, follow evidence, and understand the city he protects but no longer belongs to. Socially, the new villain is described as a person no one can even see. That's a perfect conceptual enemy for a movie about a hero no one remembers. Socially, Peter Parker is invisible. The villain is invisible physically or perceptually. Spider-Man is out in the open as a symbol, and the man behind the mask has faded from shared memory. So the conflict seems to be built around different kinds of absence. Visual confidence is also menaced by an invisible force in superhero cinema. The danger these films usually reveal is one of scale. The villain is bigger, louder, more armored, or more spectacular than the hero. If you can't see the enemy, perception is the field of battle. Spider-Man's famous danger sense may be more important than ordinary sight. The hero who navigates the city on a feeling before he knows what it is may be uniquely qualified to confront an enemy that is defined by concealment. The big bad has not been named in the official material. That's a secret worth keeping. The question to ask isn't which comic book name will be appearing, but why does invisibility need to be in this story? Peter has elected not to be seen by those he loves. He may think that is his protection. A villain can make the same condition power. The film can ask the question of whether to disappear is an act of sacrifice, an act of control, or both. That question gets muddied by the supporting heroes. Jon Bernthal is back as Frank Castle, the Punisher. Mark Ruffalo is back as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. Their presence gives brand new day to extreme examples of what a damaged person can become when the rest of life is consumed by the mission. Frank Castle, a man who made his grief into a never-ending war. The Punisher doesn't hold the balance Peter normally strives for. He does not catch criminals. He believes they can be restrained by institutions. He kills. His symbol is not a mask for common life. It is the language of trauma that endures. So Peter and Frank are two answers to the loss. Peter's code demands that power be tempered by mercy. Frank's code considers mercy a mistake that allows violence to return. They're in the same film, more than just an action crossover. It creates an argument about what responsibility means in the face of a system in constant failure. Peter's loneliness might make Frank's certainty tempting. The Punisher doesn't have to negotiate between Peter Parker and a superhero identity. Frank Castle has let the mission consume the man. Brand New Day can have Peter contemplating a possible future where the idea of being full-time stops sounding heroic and starts to sound like self-assured. The important difference is that Spider-Man saves people who may never even say thank you. The Punisher punishes those he thinks have lost the right to be redeemed. Their methods aren't different incarnations of the same idea. They are coming from opposite positions on what is natural for humans: grief, rage, military discipline, and an almost scary ability to keep going after being physically damaged have influenced Bernthal's take on the Punisher. His presence may give the film some moral heft. If Peter is not simply impressed by his efficacy, Frank works with a clarity that should unsettle Spider-Man. Frank should be annoyed by the limits Peter puts on himself. That conflict can also bring back one of Spider-Man's defining characteristics. He talks because he's trying to prevent violence from becoming inevitable. Not only are the jokes entertaining, they take the rhythm out of the emotion of a fight. They make you hesitate. They shut down the enemy's ability to set the tone. Humor may not work against the Punisher, and so Peter's moral argument is given more weight. Bruce Banner and the Hulk horror. Different kind of mirror. The transformation of Banner's body has always been linked to anger, fear, and loss of control. Peter's new physical evolution brings him to the heart of Bruce's problem. A body can be powerful in excess of intent. Lack of control may be present, but the person may be morally responsible for actions through that control. All the more relevant is the fact that Ruffalo is back. He's not just the usual big-name MCU guest star thrown into a Spider-Man movie. He understands the terror of turning into a physical threat to the people you want to protect. Peter's change and Banner's Hulk state aren't necessarily the same kind of event. The film has not claimed they are. The thematic relation is nevertheless obvious. Both characters have bodies that render ordinary safety impossible. Depending on the story, Bruce can be a warning, a mentor, or an obstacle. He has spent years seeking a synthesis of intellect and rage. Peter is much younger, more isolated, and less inclined to stop moving. Perhaps Bruce recognizes increased danger as a reason to work harder rather than a reason to ask for help. The Hulk changes the scale of action, too. As long as the destruction is emotionally tied to Peter's choices, a street-level Spider-Man story can have a massive character and still keep the local stakes. Can Hulk smash a city block? That is the question. Everyone knows he can. The question is, what does Peter do when someone he respects becomes a physical event he cannot control? The triangle of Punisher and Hulk is a beautiful one around Spider-Man. Frank is merciless control. Hulk is power without a stable control. Between them, responsibility has to be Peter's. And that balance might be the whole movie. Peter cannot be Frank. Responsibility without compassion becomes punishment. He cannot yield to a change that is unbridled, for good intentions do not nullify physical effects. He must remain a person who can choose restraint when his body, grief and circumstances push him to extremes. MJ and Ned are the human side of Peter that doesn't work in superhero ethics. Zendaya and Jacob Batalon have been confirmed to be in the cast, but the marketing has been tight-lipped about the size and shape of their roles. That makes sense. Their return is less a promise of automatic reunion than a test of the decision Peter made at the end of No Way Home. Peter went into the coffee shop to bring back their memories. He saw the injury on MJ, saw how easily she was talking to Ned, and decided telling them could put them in danger again. It was a loving decision, taken without their consent. That contradiction is significant, and Peter defended them by choosing for them. He refused to let them decide whether a dangerous friendship was still worth keeping. The sacrifice of the superhero often seems noble because the pain is borne solely by the hero. It may look like caring, but it is really controlling. Brand New Day can examine that decision without simply saying it's right or wrong. Peter had real proof that knowing him was dangerous. Aunt May was gone. MJ fell down from the Statue of Liberty. Ned was pulled into a multiversal disaster. The danger was not a ghost, but people are more than the threats around them. MJ and Ned had agency in the last films. They decided to help. They knew it was risky to be connected to Peter, and they kept risking because the relationship was important. 4 years later, the question is more painful. Peter has allowed a new life to develop in their absence. They have let lives grow up without him. The past would not be given back to everyone to the exact moment before the spell. Time has moved on. That's why the title Brand New Day shouldn't simply be a reset. A new day is not a step back into the past. It is an opportunity to choose what to take forward. The film can claim emotional power by refusing an easy memory solution. Even if MJ or Ned learn the truth, knowledge cannot automatically replicate intimacy. Peter is different now because he's been alone so much. They've changed through lives where he wasn't present. The relationship would have to be rebuilt, not magically picked up. That possibility makes the story more grown-up than the high school trilogy. Young love is often rooted in mutual discovery. Adult love has to negotiate history, choice, damage, and the fact that people can care deeply and still not go back to an earlier version of themselves. Official cast members include Sadie Sink and Trammell Tillman, but Sony's main movie page deliberately keeps the roles under wraps. Because of that secrecy, there's been a lot of speculation online. A responsible preview will resist the temptation to turn guesses into facts. All that can be said is that it needs new characters. MJ and Ned cannot be frozen emotionally in Peter's world. If Brand New Day truly is the beginning of a new chapter, it has to provide him with new relationships that are not just a stopgap for the old ones. The problem he has created would confront Peter with a new friend, rival, investigator, civilian, or potential romantic connection. Once he has decided that knowledge is dangerous, how can he allow anyone to know him? He is establishing confidence without telling the whole story. Will Peter Parker be social again, or has he accepted that only Spider-Man is worthy of being seen? Trammell Tillman has a screen presence built on intelligence, calmness, and the idea that control is covering up something more explosive. Sadie Sink can combine vulnerability and stubborn energy. It is easy to see why both actors are useful if a story about hidden identity and unstable transformation without assigning them unconfirmed roles. Another big continuity signal is Michael Mando being in the confirmed cast. He previously played Matt Gargan in Spider-Man: Homecoming, and his character ended the film injured, in prison and curious about Spider-Man's identity. We don't know every detail of his return. Sony's current cast list doesn't specify his role, so it's safest not to pretend we do. Still, the return of Mando hints that Brand New Day ties up some loose ends on the street level from the first film. That matters because the MCU Spider-Man trilogy has sometimes raced toward larger threats so quickly that it's left local consequences in the dust. The criminals who used alien tech, the damage done by cleanup contracts, the resentment that came when people with access to the levers of power replaced regular workers. Matt Gargan was of that world. Going back to him would make the new start feel more connected than random. Even if a city forgets Peter Parker, it remembers the violence. Criminals might recall that Spider-Man. Spider-Man may recall police. Spider-Man might remember news outlets. The person was taken by the spell, not necessarily the public history of the masked hero. So Peter has a strange reputation in him. People can argue about his actions, blame him, praise him, or hunt him without knowing there is an isolated young man under the suit. In No Way Home, Jonah Jameson used Peter's unmasked identity, the centerpiece of his campaign. Even if that specific name vanished, the accusation would remain emotionally useful even after the spell. Still, Spider-Man can be seen as dangerous, because anonymity itself is suspect. This is yet another reason why the invisible villain is an intellectually powerful concept. The city might be afraid of what it cannot name. The Spider-Man himself is a mystery. The story can pit the secrecy a hero needs against the secrecy an enemy weaponizes. Destin Daniel Cretton directs the film, replacing John Watts, who directed the previous 3 Holland solo outings. One of the most obvious ways that Marvel and Sony are trying to make this new chapter feel different is by changing the director. Cretton's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings possessed a gift for mixing intimate family pain with high-stakes action. The most interesting conflict in the film was not hero versus villain, a son facing a father whose grief had turned into a system of control. That makes Cretton a good fit for a Spider-Man story where emotional damage affects both the body and the mission. His style of action counts too. Shang-Chi was most individual when movement revealed character. The improvisation of the bus fight, the vertical danger of the scaffolding sequence, and the elegant contrast between different martial arts philosophies. Spider-Man needs movement that speaks through space. The audience needs to know where Peter is, and what he's protecting, and how webs affect movement, and why a certain decision is important. Filming began with location work in Glasgow, where streets were dressed to resemble New York. Sony and Marvel released behind-the-scenes material showing the practical street filming and large opening action sequence. That way can help the film to regain some physical texture after No Way Home, whose production was impacted by pandemic-era restrictions and a lot of soundstage work. Spider-Man needs a big city. He doesn't just fly through backgrounds, pulling against buildings, diverting vehicles, landing on fire escapes, using signs as anchors, calculating if a web line can hold. When action is staged in a recognizable physical environment, his power seems inventive, not automatic. Tom Holland is one of the few superhero stars for whom the movement is part of the role even before the digital effects are added. Peter's dance and gymnastics background has given him a young physical vocabulary. He can look both precise and unbalanced at the same time, which is perfect for Spider-Man. The character usually survives, since a mistake becomes a new move. The new physical evolution may help the film to change that vocabulary. Familiar movements can become disturbing if Peter's body changes. Jump may go further than expected. A grip can be too tight. A reflex can precede moral judgment. The body can be a very visually impressive thing, and the person inside the body is afraid. Chris McKenna and Eric Summers are back as writers. Their ongoing participation offers narrative continuity with the Holland films, even as the directorial voice shifts with Cretton. They get the particular rhythm of this Peter Parker, his combination of earnestness, panic, humor, and self-recrimination. This time they have a more difficult challenge, because the supporting structure has been taken away. High school came with automatic characters, schedules, and conflicts. The Avengers offered a more institutional context. No Way Home brought legacy characters and multiverse recognition. Brand New Day has to build up a daily life practically from scratch. That is risk and possibility at once. The danger is that the movie fills the void with too many guest characters, villains, and MCU ties. Confirmed cast already includes Spider-Man, MJ, Ned, Punisher, Hulk, new mystery roles, and returning continuity. A story about loneliness can become too busy if each scene is written to introduce another surprise. The chances are that each guest can mirror a different part of Peter's crisis. Hulk can stand in for bodily instability. Punisher can be mission and not personal life. MJ and Ned can mirror intimacy lost and memory. A returning criminal may be a reflection of unfulfilled local consequences. New characters will challenge Peter's ability to build a future. If those elements revolve around Peter and don't vie to replace him, then the film will work. That was one of the conflicts in No Way Home, the return of Tobey Maguire. Andrew Garfield and a few villains brought great emotional pleasure, that the film still needed to be Tom Holland's story. It worked when the older Spider-Men helped Peter understand grief without making the ultimate decision for him. But Brand New Day has to reinstill that discipline, but in a different shape. Hulk and Punisher aren't just there because people know them. That should make it harder for Peter to avoid the main problem. The title comes from a major era of Spider-Man publishing that followed the controversial comic storyline One More Day. And in the comics, Peter's life was reset by a supernatural bargain that rewrote personal history. Brand New Day returned him to the status of a struggling, single Spider-Man and introduced or emphasized new supporting characters, new enemies, and a renewed focus on his unstable everyday life. The film will not be a straight-up retelling of that storyline. The MCU has already established its own take on a magical reset through Doctor Strange's spell. The title is apt, as both versions begin after reality has been manipulated to separate Peter from an existing romantic history. Useful connection is not exact story. Its status. Peter enters a world that is familiar to the audience, but reconfigured around him. Old relationships don't function the same way anymore. The social map has changed, and new threats can emerge. The hero must build a new life, holding memories that no one else carries. The Brand New Day era of the comic also focused on classic Spider-Man problems: money, jobs, mistaken identity, crime, new villains, and the collision of personal failure and heroic effort. There is more to the film title than a reference. It promises to bring back the machinery that makes Spider-Man stand out from other superheroes. Spider-Man isn't just his powers and costume. He's defined by the impossibility of balancing all responsibilities. Peter, who is completely isolated, endangers that structure. If he has no friends, no job, no school, no family, and no public identity, all problems are Spider-Man problems. The film has to re-establish Peter Parker's responsibilities. He needs people expecting him to arrive, not knowing that a collapsing bridge stopped him. He needs consequences that cannot be beat. One pressure, according to the official synopsis, is watching old friends move on. The film can also extend further, showing the everyday survival of Peter. Where does he stay? How does he buy food, web fluid, repairs, transport? Does he work? Does he work for a name that no one can trace to a past? What happens when the official systems can't confirm him? None of these details are distractions from superhero action. They're the reason Spider-Man action exists. He saves a city that can still throw him out. The 4-year gap also puts Peter in a different stage of adulthood. He's not a child anymore who's told he has potential. His decisions are already irreversible. Adults may advise him, but they cannot bring him back to innocence. This is where Tom Holland's age is to his advantage. He can still get the physicality of a teenage Spider-Man, but he doesn't have to play Peter as a high school student anymore. The face behind the mask can be tired, repetitive, and strangely mature. Someone who survived things that no one else remembers sharing with him. The marketing campaign's emotional tagline is "The world has forgotten Peter Parker." But he hasn't forgotten them. It presents memory as a burden. And as a token of love, Peter's memory hurts, because he cared about the relationships. It would be easier to forget it. His heroism is most evident in his ongoing effort to protect those who are unable to see his sacrifice. But memory can also be a jail. For example, Peter may see what he knows of the old relationships as more real than the current choices of MJ and Ned. He might be watching from afar, thinking he's saving them, when he's saving an image of who they were. A new day is only truly new when we allow other people to become new. The official synopsis says that Peter's very existence is threatened by the physical evolution. That wording can be literal, psychological, and/or both. It hints of more than a passing power boost. The change could end what little barrier still exists between Peter and Spider-Man. That's where body horror can seep into a franchise associated with bright movement and jokes. Spider-Man's powers are a bit disturbing. The ability to cling to things with microscopic structures, to be aware of danger before you're aware of danger, to generate or utilize web-like material, to move with non-human flexibility. Most films make those abilities neat and clean. A story of transformation can make them weird again. The original fantasy of Spider-Man was that a physically awkward young person could become physically extraordinary without losing his awkwardness. Peter's humanity had survived the bite. Brand New Day can ask whether that balance is still solid. The transformation might be exploited by the invisible enemy, may cause it, may react to it, or just pop up in the process. The official material does not provide enough evidence to specify the mechanism. More important is the relation of the theme. Peter might not be able to trust his sight. He might not be able to trust his body. That puts Spider-Sense potentially front and center. Spider-Sense, one of the character's most cinematic powers, turns instinct into editing, sound, and movement. In Far From Home, Peter closes his eyes in the last fight with Mysterio and believes the warning under illusion. That idea can be taken out of one sequence by Brand New Day's invisible threat. Trusting instinct is not the same as giving into impulse. Peter may sense danger, but he has to decide what to do before he knows what it is. If his physical evolution increases aggression or automatic response, the power that saves him will also reduce his ability to choose. The Punisher would read it as weakness. Bruce Banner would know all about the virtues of hesitation. Peter's in between them again. The movie's biggest potential is to turn superhero crossover into character pressure. Frank and Bruce shouldn't be cameos that borrow the movie for a bit. They should be alternative answers to Peter's problem. Frank thinks identity can be sacrificed to mission because Frank Castle's former life died with his family. Bruce has tried over and over to split, suppress, or incorporate parts of himself as the Hulk makes ordinary life dangerous. In his relationships, Peter has chosen to step away for their own good, and now he must confront a body that may punish that strategy. All three men are molded by a fear that intimacy equals pain. That's the difference. What they do with that fear. Frank turns out and wages war. Bruce turns in and scans control. Peter keeps walking through the city, trying to save everyone, but refusing to ask if he's still saving himself. MJ matters because she can blow up the whole heroic framework. It doesn't have to be an ethical theory. She can just be a person whose life was changed without her consent. Her point of view can burst Peter's bubble of turning emotional decisions into necessary sacrifices. Ned is also important because friendship was one of the foundations of the trilogy. He was the first peer to learn the secret and to marvel at it and not to fear. That was not a consequence of losing that friendship. It killed the guy who made Spider-Man's impossible life seem like it was a shared life. A reunion with Ned would be a test of whether humor could return to Peter's world. Their friendship was a nice touch to the previous films, but to recreate the old dynamic precisely would devalue the expense of No Way Home. If a new relationship is formed, it should contain distance, confusion, and the fact that Peter remembers years that Ned does. Not. Brand New Day could be the first Holland Spider-Man movie where Peter gets all the big emotional contexts, while the people around him don't get the contexts. In the first trilogy, the adults often knew better about the superhero world. Peter now has an invisible history. It can make him seem older and more lonely. It can also make him undependable. He may think he knows what is best for everybody because he's remembering the past. Memory is knowledge, not possession. The city is the only relationship that has lasted without a break. New York doesn't know Peter's name, but Spider-Man knows its routes, rhythms and dangers. He can tell where traffic will back up, what buildings allow a swing queue, where emergency vehicles will come, and how crowds react to panic. It is in the city where his body still makes sense. That's why location shooting is an artistic necessity. A believable New York can be a home for Spider-Man even when he has none. Streets, rooftops, bridges, alleys, trains, flat windows become a social fabric. That fabric, the invisible villain, threatens. A pattern of crime means the city is talking through damage. Peter has to read it. That detective side could bring back Peter's intelligence as a central heroic trait. Holland's Spider-Man is a scientific genius, but sometimes the movies have the technology or the bigger mentor figures feed him information. A self-reliant Peter should make tools, examine evidence and make links. Spider-Man is at his best when he wins by improvisational understanding, not brute strength. He sees the chemical property, the structural weakness, the emotional trigger, or the timing mistake. His intelligence is not out of action. It changes actions. Such a change could upset that balance by making strength easier. If Peter gets stronger, the film has to ensure that strength is not the answer to the emotional problem. Even a stronger Spider-Man can fail if he misreads a person, refuses help, or treats each warning as an obstacle. No Way Home ended with Peter learning a hard lesson about control. He couldn't cure the bad guys, save every relationship, contain the multiverse, and keep Aunt May alive. Success costs lives, but he still saves some. Brand New Day seems to start off with Peter overcorrecting. If relationships are dangerous, drop relationships. If normal life is the source of conflict, become Spider-Man full-time. Never stop if the city needs to be protected. The new physical crisis shows the flaw in that solution. A human being is not a function without consequence. The title may therefore seem to be ironic at first. Peter has made a new day, but it's the same night that repeats. He wakes, patrols, fights, repairs, starts again. Nothing changes because he's made a life where no one is close enough to change him. A real new beginning would require vulnerability. This doesn't mean re-experiencing every memory right away. It means letting Peter Parker be a person again who is known in the present, with Peter and MJ forming one of the central young relationships in the MCU. People will be watching the romance in the movie closely. The mature choice is not necessarily reunion or separation. It is the truth of what the spell did. If MJ has carved out a different life, the film should honor that. If she feels some kind of inexplicable pull toward Peter, then that shouldn't cancel out her agency. If memories come back, they should come back as emotionally difficult knowledge, not as a button that restores the previous trilogy. The same with Ned. The price of the spell only matters if time and identity matter. The mystery roles are a way to save the film from being caught in nostalgia. For a new chapter, it needs people who meet Peter as he is now, not as the teen the audience remembers. They can see what he sees as normal habits and see them as alarming. Whoever the central villain is, they can use Peter's invisibility to their advantage, as isolation lessens verification. Who can say where he was? Who can say what happened to him, or whether his perception is changing? When no one knows Peter, An enemy he cannot see makes him doubt himself. The evolution of the physical makes others doubt him. That's a good basis for a paranoia. Spider-Man is generally a rather handsome public hero. Phones are listening to him. People scream. News shows argue with him. But his most important battle may be where the enemy cannot be seen through the cameras. The public would see destruction and blame the only superhuman in the area. This would keep up the pressure Jay had made. Jonah Jameson, without the identity-revealing plot, what can be thrown at Spider-Man is exactly that Peter Parker is no longer out there publicly defending the person under the mask. The mask is to protect him and to trap him. The movies. Production history adds to the sense of a reset. Principal photography began in August 2025 with public location work in Glasgow and wrapped in December 2025. In March 2026, the first official trailer was released and Marvel announced a huge first-day global audience. There was a second major marketing push in June, with ticket sales opening in front of the July 31st release. The campaign has leaned into the emotional premise more than a full-on villain reveal. That's a good choice. No Way Home's marketing relied on secrecy around legacy characters. Brand New Day's mystery is something else. The audience already knows Peter's central wound. The question is what the wound has turned him into. The poster line that the world forgot Peter, but he did not forget them works better than a list of villains because it reminds viewers that the ending of No Way Home was not a trick. The new film is built out of its consequence. The film also arrives at a critical juncture for the MCU. Spider-Man is still one of the more iconic heroes in the franchise, but Peter's personal story can't survive if every movie exists to connect bigger events. Brand New Day has to work within a shared universe, but not feel like a corridor to the next crossover. Hulk and Punisher add to that danger. They also provide a solution. Both can add to Peter's story if their purpose is thematic rather than promotional. Spider-Man has often served as a bridge between scales for the MCU. He can catch a bicycle thief, tussle with the Avengers, and go to space, but still be worried about being late on an assignment. Brand New Day appears to pull him back to New York, while keeping in touch with a larger world. The right way to go post the multiversal scale of No Way Home. Escalation doesn't always mean a larger universe. It can mean a more personal threat to identity. A villain you can't see that's affecting the city. A transformation that threatens Peter's very existence might be spectacle, but the emotional scale is intimate. Peter isn't trying to prove that alternate realities exist. He's trying to see whether he can stay himself. Tone of the film will be key. Spider-Man needs humor, but not to the extent that the loneliness is erased with constant jokes. He needs hope, too, but hope must not be a speech separated from behavior. The best version of the film will let humor become a sign of recovery. The habit is still there, so Peter might start joking during fights automatically. Later he lets someone else into the rhythm, and real humor can return. Cretton's writing often leaves readers in emotional silence before action resumes. That quality could help Tom Holland develop a more adult Peter. The mask is expressive in the shapes and movement of the eyes, but the unmasked scenes must pay the bill. Holland has been Peter through adolescence, cosmic war, death, resurrection, public exposure, and magical erasure. Brand New Day allows him to show continuity without having to spell it out in every scene. A coffee shop entrance pause could save No Way Home. Reactions to Bruce Banner can include memories of the Avengers. Refusing to use lethal force can be Aunt May's last lesson. No Way Home finally put with great power comes great responsibility out there clearly. Now, 4 years later, Brand New Day has to explore what Peter thinks the sentence means. Responsibility does not mean carrying all the load yourself. Responsibility is not about becoming a weapon. Responsibility is not about controlling other people's choices for their own good. Responsibility is the act of being answerable to the human consequences of action, which is why collaboration is probably going to matter. Peter's biggest mistake might not be that he didn't use enough power. Maybe it may be not allowing anyone to share the problem. Frank Castle is not a healthy collaboration, as he gives efficiency at the cost of Peter's code. Bruce Banner can be knowledgeable, but he can be dangerous. MJ and Ned are emotional truth. Peter has denied them context. New characters can connect without a history, but Peter may be afraid of repeating the past. The movie can create suspense, not just by revealing who is the strongest, but also by having Peter decide who to trust. The unseen threat makes trust structurally required. What one man can set down, another may feel. One character might understand the body, another the pattern of the crime. Spider-Man's powers can sense danger, but they may not show motive. A good Spider-Man mystery makes the web a model of the tale. Separate points are connected. Pulling on one strand pulls on others. Peter's gift is more than spinning webs. It is that he knows how to have relationships. The tragedy is that he has cut himself off from his own human web. Brand New Day can have that visual, emotional idea at its heart. The city is linked. The crimes are linked. The secondary characters are linked. Only Peter has opted for disconnection. The new physical evolution may literally force connection, if it binds him closer to danger, to instinct or to the city. Again, the precise mechanism is unclear and speculation should not be mistaken for fact. The important possibility is that the transformation externalizes what Peter has tried to repress. It may also look at the public consumption of Spider-Man. The image of a full-time working hero is not fading. People log rescues, argue online and have expectations. The more Spider-Man does his job, the less room there is for Peter to exist. But the audience could still say, he isn't doing enough. This is classic Spider-Man pressure. Power grows responsibility faster than a single person can meet it. Every rescue reveals another rescue that never took place. The 4 years could have made Peter very competent. Competence is its own dramatic problem. A hero who knows all the moves may stop listening. The transformation and the hidden enemy may interfere with routines that once worked. Hulk is useful here because he brings competence into perspective. Spider-Man may be fast, seasoned and clever, but he can't write the script for every force on the scene. The Punisher is useful because he will not tolerate uncertainty through violence. Peter needs to find a third response, adaptive restraint. These philosophies can physically distinguish the action of the film. Punisher goes straight for a target and takes damage. Hulk converts the environment to force. Spider-Man redirects, suspends, catches, and creates paths. His way of fighting is ethical enough, and webs capture more than they kill. Swinging is about connection, not about loneliness. Every movement has an anchor on the outside. That is the visual argument the story can make. Spider-Man literally cannot swing without attaching himself to something. Peter Parker has tried to live free. His body might be telling him it can't be done. In depth character and story analysis. The everyday life Peter has to reconstruct. Most important thing missing from Peter's new life isn't a person, or a flat, or a piece of technology. That's Peter Parker's routine, not Spider-Man's routine. A human life consists of repetitive duties without heroic glamour. Getting up at a certain hour, answering messages, buying food, arriving at work, remembering appointments, and letting other people depend on you in small ways. Peter has traded many of those obligations for patrols. That might make him more available to the city, but it also removes the ordinary structure that tells him when he is tired, lonely or scared. An adult Spider-Man story has to take mundane responsibility as seriously as superhuman responsibility. Peter can prevent a robbery and still be late with the rent. He can prevent a train accident and still not return a call. These jokes aren't wrapped around the real plot. They are the means by which heroism does not become an escape. Saving strangers is morally important, but it can be easier than sitting across from someone who knows when Peter is lying. The core emotional question is whether Peter has constructed a life or a hiding place. A small apartment can be a home, or it can be a room where someone stashes a costume between patrols. Work can build community, or be a source of income that Peter walks away from when the police scanner crackles to life. It makes a difference whether he allows the claims of the ordinary world upon him. This is why the best new supporting characters wouldn't only admire Spider-Man, they would want something from Peter Parker. A neighbor might need dependability. A co-worker may notice unexplained injuries. A friend might not put up with repeated disappearances. These pressures would not dilute the superhero narrative. They would reveal the price of Peter trying to bifurcate himself after saying one identity is still there. Peter's adult life should also involve decisions that can't be worked out by confession alone. If he told the truth and said that he was Spider-Man, it might account for his tardiness, but it would not naturally undo the damage caused by his absence. The secret identity poses a problem, but Peter is still responsible for how he handles the problem. Maturity is understanding that a good reason does not erase someone else's disappointment. The city as a witness in Peter's story. New York is the only one who always remembers Spider-Man, without remembering Peter Parker. Buildings bear the scars of battle. Footage is in news archives. Civilians recall being saved. Criminals remember getting arrested. Even if the person's private history is gone, the city has a public history of the hero. It produces a strange sort of continuity. Peter can go back to a street where something important happened and know that the place remembers through physical damage, rebuilt architecture, or community stories. The man behind the mask might have people talking about Spider-Man around him. As Peter, he can hear interpretations of his own actions, but cannot amend them. That gap between experience and public story is fertile ground for a Spider-Man movie. The public rarely witnesses the moment of decision. It sees the broken window, the stalled car, the arrested criminal, or the frightened crowd. It might not know what Spider-Man stopped, what other things he rejected, or how close he came to failing. An invisible enemy makes that gap even greater, because the city may only see the results of a battle. So Peter runs the risk of becoming the visible cause of invisible damage. A camera catching him lash out at nothing, lose control of powers he's not used to. The images can make him look dangerous. His anonymity precludes normal accountability, but it also precludes normal defense. He can't have a press conference as Peter Parker and explain what happened without exposing the identity he spent years protecting. Reactions, small ones, can make the city emotionally active. Some residents might trust Spidey because they recall direct help. Some may fear him because they recall public chaos. The children may copy him. Some cops might not agree with us that he is an ally. Shop owners might be grateful for a rescue and mad about the bill for repairs. This mix is more believable than a city that loves or hates the hero as one homogeneous mass. Spider-Man has often served as a bridge between scales for the MCU. He can catch a bicycle thief, tussle with the Avengers, and go to space, but still be worried about being late on an assignment. Brand New Day appears to pull him back to New York, while keeping in touch with a larger world. The right way to go post the multiversal scale of No Way Home. Escalation doesn't always mean a larger universe. It can mean a more personal threat to identity. A villain you can't see that's affecting the city. A transformation that threatens Peter's very existence might be spectacle, but the emotional scale is intimate. Peter isn't trying to prove that alternate realities exist. He's trying to see whether he can stay himself. Tone of the film will be key. Spider-Man needs humor, but not to the extent that the loneliness is erased with constant jokes. He needs hope, too, but hope must not be a speech separated from behavior. The best version of the film will let humor become a sign of recovery. The habit is still there, so Peter might start joking during fights automatically. Later he lets someone else into the rhythm, and real humor can return. Cretton's writing often leaves readers in emotional silence before action resumes. That quality could help Tom Holland develop a more adult Peter. The mask is expressive in the shapes and movement of the eyes, but the unmasked scenes must pay the bill. Holland has been Peter through adolescence, cosmic war, death, resurrection, public exposure, and magical erasure. Brand New Day allows him to show continuity without having to spell it out in every scene. A coffee shop entrance pause could save No Way Home. Reactions to Bruce Banner can include memories of the Avengers. Refusing to use lethal force can be Aunt May's last lesson. No Way Home finally put with great power comes great responsibility out there clearly. Now, 4 years later, Brand New Day has to explore what Peter thinks the sentence means. Responsibility does not mean carrying all the load yourself. Responsibility is not about becoming a weapon. Responsibility is not about controlling other people's choices for their own good. Responsibility is the act of being answerable to the human consequences of action, which is why collaboration is probably going to matter. Peter's biggest mistake might not be that he didn't use enough power. Maybe it may be not allowing anyone to share the problem. Frank Castle is not a healthy collaboration, as he gives efficiency at the cost of Peter's code. Bruce Banner can be knowledgeable, but he can be dangerous. MJ and Ned are emotional truth. Peter has denied them context. New characters can connect without a history, but Peter may be afraid of repeating the past. The movie can create suspense, not just by revealing who is the strongest, but also by having Peter decide who to trust. The unseen threat makes trust structurally required. What one man can set down, another may feel. One character might understand the body, another the pattern of the crime. Spider-Man's powers can sense danger, but they may not show motive. A good Spider-Man mystery makes the web a model of the tale. Separate points are connected. Pulling on one strand pulls on others. Peter's gift is more than spinning webs. It is that he knows how to have relationships. The tragedy is that he has cut himself off from his own human web. Brand New Day can have that visual, emotional idea at its heart. The city is linked. The crimes are linked. The secondary characters are linked. Only Peter has opted for disconnection. The new physical evolution may literally force connection if it binds him closer to danger, to instinct or to the city. Again, the precise mechanism is unclear and speculation should not be mistaken for fact. The important possibility is that the transformation externalizes what Peter has tried to repress. It may also look at the public consumption of Spider-Man. The image of a full-time working hero is not fading. People log rescues, argue online, and have expectations. The more Spider-Man does his job, the less room there is for Peter to exist. But the audience could still say, he isn't doing enough. This is classic Spider-Man pressure. Power grows responsibility faster than a single person can meet it. Every rescue reveals another rescue that never took place. The 4 years could have made Peter very competent. Competence is its own dramatic problem. A hero who knows all the moves may stop listening. The transformation and the hidden enemy may interfere with routines that once worked. Hulk is useful here because he brings competence into perspective. Spider-Man may be fast, seasoned and clever, but he can't write the script for every force on the scene. The Punisher is useful because he will not tolerate uncertainty through violence. Peter needs to find a third response, adaptive restraint. These philosophies can physically distinguish the action of the film. Punisher goes straight for a target and takes damage. Hulk converts the environment to force. Spider-Man redirects, suspends, catches, and creates paths. His way of fighting is ethical enough, and webs capture more than they kill. Swinging is about connection, not about loneliness. Every movement has an anchor on the outside. That is the visual argument the story can make. Spider-Man literally cannot swing without attaching himself to something. Peter Parker has tried to live free. His body might be telling him it can't be done. In depth character and story analysis. The everyday life Peter has to reconstruct. The most important thing missing from Peter's new life isn't a person, or a flat, or a piece of technology. That's Peter Parker's routine, not Spider-Man's routine. A human life consists of repetitive duties without heroic glamour. Getting up at a certain hour, answering messages, buying food, arriving at work, remembering appointments, and letting other people depend on you in small ways. Peter has traded many of those obligations for patrols. That might make him more available to the city, but it also removes the ordinary structure that tells him when he's tired, lonely or scared. An adult Spider-Man story has to take mundane responsibility as seriously as superhuman responsibility. Peter can prevent a robbery and still be late with the rent. He can prevent a train accident and still not return a call. These jokes aren't wrapped around the real plot. They are the means by which heroism does not become an escape. Saving strangers is morally important, but it can be easier than sitting across from someone who knows when Peter is lying. The core emotional question is whether Peter has constructed a life or a hiding place. A small apartment can be a home, or it can be a room where someone stashes a costume between patrols. Work can build community, or be a source of income that Peter walks away from when the police scanner crackles to life. It makes a difference whether he allows the claims of the ordinary world upon him. This is why the best new supporting characters wouldn't only admire Spider-Man, they would want something from Peter Parker. A neighbor might need dependability. A co-worker may notice unexplained injuries. A friend might not put up with repeated disappearances. These pressures would not dilute the superhero narrative. They would reveal the price of Peter trying to bifurcate himself after saying one identity is still there. Peter's adult life should also involve decisions that can't be worked out by confession alone. If he told the truth and said that he was Spider-Man, it might account for his tardiness, but it would not naturally undo the damage caused by his absence. The secret identity poses a problem, but Peter is still responsible for how he handles the problem. Maturity is understanding that a good reason does not erase someone else's disappointment. The city as a witness in Peter's story. New York is the only one who always remembers Spider-Man, without remembering Peter Parker. Buildings bear the scars of battle. Footage is in news archives. Civilians recall being saved. Criminals remember getting arrested. Even if the person's private history is gone, the city has a public history of the hero. It produces a strange sort of continuity. Peter can go back to a street where something important happened and know that the place remembers through physical damage, rebuilt architecture, or community stories. The man behind the mask might have people talking about Spider-Man around him. As Peter, he can hear interpretations of his own actions, but cannot amend them. That gap between experience and public story is fertile ground for a Spider-Man movie. The public rarely witnesses the moment of decision. It sees the broken window, the stalled car, the arrested criminal, or the frightened crowd. It might not know what Spider-Man stopped, what other things he rejected, or how close he came to failing. An invisible enemy makes that gap even greater, because the city may only see the results of a battle. So Peter runs the risk of becoming the visible cause of invisible damage. A camera catching him lash out at nothing, lose control of powers he's not used to. The images can make him look dangerous. His anonymity precludes normal accountability, but it also precludes normal defense. He can't have a press conference as Peter Parker and explain what happened without exposing the identity he's spent years protecting. Reactions, small ones, can make the city emotionally active. Some residents might trust Spidey because they recall direct help. Some may fear him because they recall public chaos. The children may copy him. Some cops might not agree with us that he is an ally. Shop owners might be grateful for a rescue and mad about the bill for repairs. This mix is more believable than a city that loves or hates the hero as one homogeneous mass. The street-level view is most potent when the film knows that public spaces contain private lives. A taxi, belonging to a driver, is damaged. Ambulance held up by a blocked road. Behind them the family faces a crumbling wall in the flat. He understands those cascading consequences better than anyone, and that's what makes Spider-Man act heroically. Accountability and martyrdom. Peter's greatest moral strength becomes his most dangerous emotional habit. He believes that power carries with it responsibility, but responsibility often means suffering on his own part. When things go wrong, his first instinct is to carry more. He works harder, keeps more information secret, and isolates himself from relationship. The logic is noble because he is willing to pay the cost himself. The problem is martyrdom can be an exit from mutual responsibility. Only martyr knows what everybody else needs and accepts pain as a sign of love. Real relationship is less in control. It lets people disagree, take risks, help and make choices Peter can't promise will be safe. Part of what makes No Way Home's coffee shop ending so powerful is that Peter's decision is both an act of love and a fear of that love. He realizes that MJ and Ned can live without him and decides not to drag them back into danger. The choice is to protect them, and it doesn't let them speak for themselves. 4 years of isolation could have turned that one choice into a philosophy. Peter can tell himself that each new relationship is a hostage in the future. The more he cares, the more it can be used by an enemy. From a tactical point of view, the distance seems fair. From a human point of view, it slowly turns fear into the organizing principle of his life. Brand New Day can challenge that philosophy without insulting the sacrifice that made it. Peter did not arrive at his final decision lightly. The peril was real. The challenge is how to show that a decision can be understandable at one moment and unhealthy if repeated forever. Accountability means being ready to be known by people who can hold Peter accountable. A man who works alone can prove to himself that every failure is proof that he must work harder. A friend can ask, has the work become destructive in and of itself? That question is threatening because it cannot be answered by a web or a scientific calculation. The title is meaningful when Peter learns that a new beginning is not without its risks. It is the choice to live in the face of risk. He can't promise that the connection will never hurt. He can just decide if fear is going to ruin every relationship before it begins. Memory as an asymmetrical relation. Peter's memory gives him emotional knowledge no one else has. He remembers the first time Ned found out the secret, the school trips, the battles, MJ's trust, Aunt May's advice and the last promise to come back. They make the relationships seem real to him even as they don't exist in the same way for anyone else. Besides sadness, this imbalance provides dramatic tension. Peter can go to MJ or Ned thinking he knows them inside out. He is a stranger in their eyes, and yet strangely familiar. To them, it seems intrusive. To him, it seems caring. The film can question that discomfort without making Peter evil. Memory also remembers an earlier version of people. MJ's image is Peter's from the life they had before the spell. 4 years later, she may have grown into ambitions, relationships, fears and habits he's never seen. Loving who she was doesn't necessarily mean understanding who she is. That's part of why the movie should resist the idea that restored memory is a complete fix. The years that were missing would still be missing, no matter if the knowledge of magic returned. I mean, memory could provide context, but you would still need trust in present choices. Recognition is the emotional work, not before it. The present is empty, and perhaps Peter idealizes the past. The earlier trilogy was full of danger, conflict and loss, but memory can turn it into a time when he belonged somewhere. A brand new day could remind him that connection was neither safe nor simple. It was its value to be chosen, though. The morality of watching from afar. Lonely Peter may continue to watch MJ and Ned, but not approach them. He can tell himself he's checking to see that they are safe. After all they survived, the behavior would be understandable, but it poses a tough question. When does protection become surveillance? Spider-Man's powers make distance simple. Peter can be on a rooftop, hear danger, track someone across the city and intervene without being noticed. Those talents are useful against criminals. Applied to those he loves, it enables him to hold emotional contact without permission. Isolation can help preserve control in another way. Peter doesn't risk rejection because he never asks to be let into their lives. He stays hidden. He doesn't risk putting them in danger. He still gets pieces of connection by seeing them from afar. A grown-up story should never glamorize that state forever. Watching is not taking part. Saving somebody from imminent danger does not give Peter ownership of their normal life. It is a huge difference because his heroic instincts are based on intervention, and healthy relationships require boundaries. The film can demonstrate growth through non-physical restraint. Peter's greatest act of control might be not choosing to follow, not choosing to listen, and not choosing to decide for someone else. Such restraint would be a stark contrast to the bodily transformation, where control may be becoming more difficult. The evidence problem and public trust. Spider-Man's reputation has always been a balancing act of experience and interpretation. Someone he saved might trust him totally. If a viewer saw only edited footage, he might think he caused the crisis. J. Jonah Jameson thrives in that space. Because context is harder to broadcast than certainty, when the opponent is unseen, evidence becomes a central issue. What Peter feels cannot be easily verified by cameras. Witnesses could disagree. You can see the damage before you see the attacker. Spider-Man might have to act on information that is real to him but unavailable to anyone else. This situation makes it possible to experience moral isolation and social isolation. Peter may be right, but he has no proof. There is a risk that certainty, repeated, will cause him to cease explaining himself. A hero who always trusts his own perception is hard to tell apart from a dangerous man who is sure that only he sees the danger. Spider sense can warn, not tell everything. It may tell Peter that something is wrong, but not why or where or how. Instinct is necessary, but not enough. The film can hold you in suspense. Then public trust would be contingent on Peter's behavior under uncertainty. Does he do the least harm? Does he speak? Does he take help? Does he check anything before he hits? These are choices that reveal more about character than whether the crowd finally claps for him. That an accusation of Spider-Man might also make Peter recover a civilian voice. The mask is action, but Peter Parker may be needed for explanation, research and relationships with people who can't trust a symbol alone. The erased identity thus gains a significance beyond personal tragedy. It becomes an impediment to accountability. The language of feeling in physical evolution. The word physical evolution means change, and change can be both useful and frightening. In superhero movies, new powers tend to be an upgrade. The hero gets a more powerful suit, a more dramatic ability, or a more visually impressive attack. By viewing the change as a disturbance in Peter's sense of self, Brand New Day is able to give the change meaning. Normally, the most intimate evidence of continuity is a body. Peter may lose records, relationships, and public recognition, but he still wakes up inside the same physical form. If that form starts to change, then his last stable identity is in question. The transformation can express accumulated pressure, without reducing emotional pain to a mere medical condition. Peter has spent years refusing to rest, suppressing grief and exposing himself to repeated danger. The body may be the part of him that refuses to go on in silence. That would be more disturbing than instant spectacle. A line on the web could fire with unlooked for force. In an ordinary moment, his hand could destroy a thing. A sound could be agonizingly loud. Reflex may work before conscious choice. Each event would tell Peter that the skills he believes in are no longer completely familiar. It's not just the fear that he'll get hurt. That is, he will hurt someone trying to help. That fear links him to Bruce Banner. But Peter's response could be different. Transformation endangered other people, so Bruce often withdrew. For Peter has already isolated himself for emotional reasons, so physical. Danger could look like justification for a pattern already unhealthy. This is where the story can get a bit psychologically complicated. Peter might see the change as proof that closeness was never possible. Bruce may recognize that conclusion, for he has lived inside it. It can make the case for caution, without conceding that permanent self-erasure is the only way out. Body horror is most effective when the audience knows what the normal body is being lost from. Peter's hands are not only weapons, they sew a suit, repair equipment, and do careful scientific work. His senses were not only weapons of war, but a link to the city. It's frightening when change threatens those human functions. Spider sense as cinema language. The spider sense is hard to describe because it's not just sight or sound. It is awareness before description. It has been demonstrated in slow motion, visual distortion, silence, hair movement, editing and performance in different films. Brand New Day's invisibility gives the filmmakers an excuse to make the power are part of the movie's visual grammar. If you want to do it in the best way, just don't use the same effect all the time. A known hazard could elicit a speedy reaction. Contained. A new type of threat can create confusion, mixed warnings, or a feeling Peter cannot find. The audience should feel the difference between Peter trusting the sense and being overwhelmed by it. Sound design can make invisibility seem real. Tiny changes in air, fabric, footsteps, or structural vibration can become significant in a room that appears quiet. Peter's attention can shift before the camera reveals why. Instead, the viewer voices his uncertainty. Not waiting for a digital outline of the villain, the power may become emotionally untrustworthy without becoming literally false. Peter might see every warning as evidence that intimacy is dangerous. Trauma could cause Spider's sense foresees danger. Fear turns it into a philosophy. The story can uncouple biological instinct from the conclusions that Peter builds upon. The power should allow for action improvisations, not automatic success. Peter may know an attack is on the way, but he still has to protect civilians, control his changing body, and figure out where the attack is coming from. Awareness increases responsibility because he receives warning other people do not. Punisher as the bait of certainty. Frank Castle is dangerous to Peter, but it's not just because he uses lethal force. He provides moral clarity during a time of uncertainty in Peter's life. Frank sees a target, decides the target deserves punishment, and does it. There is little room for indecision, public misunderstanding, or the possibility that the enemy can change. Peter's world has taught him the reverse. No Way Home's central idea is that the villains can be cured, not killed. That decision had terrible consequences, including Aunt May's death, but her last lesson was not to reject the moral principle. 4 years later, Peter might still believe in mercy, while feeling the cost of it. That fatigue is one Frank can exploit. He can name repeat offenders, failed institutions, and innocent victims. He can make Peter's restraint a luxury other people have to pay for. Frank would not be obviously silly. Even in the strongest conflict, his arguments should come from actual failures. The danger is that, if the systems fail, then the individual execution becomes justice. Peter's response needs to be more than just killing is wrong. He must demonstrate that restraint is active, not passive. It takes skill to capture someone safely, protect witnesses, collect evidence, prevent escalation. Mercy is not just doing nothing. It is an action limited by the belief that power does not entail ownership of life. Their physical styles can speak that debate. Frank makes straight lines, target, weapon, impact. Peter makes interruptions, webs, redirects, catches, barriers. The movement stops. Peter tries to keep options open. Peter's transformation could make lethal force easier, and the conflict could become most personal. Greater strength or changed instinct can create times when quitting forever looks efficient. Then Frank's presence would not be an outside disagreement, but a course Peter's body appears to be ready to take. Bruce Banner as recognition, not instruction. Bruce best serves the story when he recognizes Peter's fear without trying to have the perfect answer. His long history with the Hulk includes experiments, failures, times of control, and times where the line between Banner and Hulk moved. He knows that identity, while he is becoming, is not a one-shot thing. Peter may be looking for a scientific answer first, that answers to his intellect. He can take samples, measure changes, and look for a mechanism. Bruce can help with those questions, but also acknowledge that Peter is dealing with the body as a machine separate from grief. A meaningful conversation between them would not claim emotion causes every physical event magically. It would show how difficult it is to maintain control when someone refuses to admit to feeling stressed, exhausted, and afraid. Emotional honesty and scientific treatment need not be mutually exclusive. Bruce also represents a future that Peter fears, a life where every relationship has to take into account the possibility of transformation. But if Bruce still lives, then danger does not cancel personhood. He's made mistakes and done wrong. But the answer wasn't to discard Bruce Banner as unworthy of connection. The mentor dynamic should be kept minimal. Peter's not the kid waiting for an Avenger to define success. Bruce can provide perspective, but Peter has to figure out what to do with it. The movie can show maturity by having Peter disagree thoughtfully, rather than just obeying or disobeying. There's also potential humor in the contrast between their scientific minds. Peter's fast improvising and Bruce's experienced caution can generate energy without making either character comic relief. Their brains should be a part of the plot, not just a way to explain things in between fights. MJ and the right to select MJ's part is the most emotionally risky because the audience already knows what Peter wants. He wants that connection back, even if he spent years refusing to chase it down. A less significant story would have her as the reward at the end of the heroic quest. A better story gives her a whole gift. She should have goals and relationships that exist beyond Peter's memory. It has to be shaped by who he is now and what information she receives, not by the audience's nostalgia. If she finds out that Peter decided not to come back, she has every right to be angry. It was a choice out of love, but it affected her life. She may embrace the risk and yet refuse to admit he was the only person to make the call. It does not mean betraying Peter for his sacrifice. You can hold both ideas in emotional truth. He held her back from real hurt. He took away her agency as well. That's the useful tension, because responsibility is often about competing goods, not about a clean answer. MJ has always been skeptical about performance. She can tell when people put on a version of themselves to manage the room. Adult Peter may have constructed an entire persona of seeming fine. Her presence is a better counter to a villain than that performance. Hence a reunion must be built on honesty, and not just recovered chemistry. Peter would have to come clean about what had happened and why he had stayed away. MJ would have to be free to choose what that knowledge means for her future. Ned, and the language of friendship. Last significance of Ned is the common pleasure which he gave to Peter's secret. He found Spiderman and replied with loyalty and excitement and questions. The friendship turned impossible events into shared experiences. Without Ned, Peter has nobody to turn a terrifying patrol to a story to tell later. The events stay in the person who survived them, that can make even wins feel unreal over time. Rebuilding the friendship would be something different from rebuilding the romance. Friendship is often based on acquired rhythm, private jokes, mutual embarrassment, familiar arguments, and the expectation that the other will be there. Peter recalls the rhythm. Ned doesn't. The asymmetry can work for the film in terms of humor and pain. Peter may expect some reaction that never comes. He may trust him on grounds he cannot explain. Ned, those moments are not to bring back the old dynamic immediately. They are to reveal the shape of what is missing. Ned is a different sort of trust that Peter might not appreciate. He helped in the previous films without having Peter's powers. It left him vulnerable to attack, but also gave meaning to his choices. Peter's choice to remove him from danger implies that safety is paramount. Ned might think that loyalty, purpose, and informed choice count too. The future and the new characters cannot thrive on the return of familiar faces. Peter needs relationships that begin after the spell, because those relationships test whether he can build a future rather than orbit a lost past. The audience's emotional assumptions are not there. When new characters come into him, they don't know the happy student, the apprentice of the Avenger, or the boyfriend who's promised to come back. They see the adult habits developed in 4 years of isolation. From that perspective, Peter can see things he no longer notices. He might think constant injury is normal. He might speak lightly of danger. He may vanish at the first touch of personal conversation. Someone who doesn't have the old history sees those patterns as choices, not inevitable features of being Spider-Man. The new relationships shouldn't be replacements for MJ, Ned, or May. To replace would be to make people narrative characters. A new friend should make a different kind of connection. A new rival should have a different vulnerability. Any possible romance should not follow the emotional path of the previous trilogy. The casting mystery is open to speculation, but the more important question is of function. New character lures Peter toward ordinary life, deeper isolation, moral compromise, or scientific understanding. But the answer is more important than a comic book name called out for applause. Spider-Man. Brand New Day. Fun fact: Spider-Man Brand New Day is the fourth solo MCU Spider-Man film, with Tom Holland following Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home. The film will premiere exclusively in theaters on July 31, 2026. The official storyline is set 4 years after the events of No Way Home. The world has forgotten that Peter Parker ever existed, but Peter remembers the people and events of his old life. Peter is reportedly living by himself and fighting crime full-time as Spider-Man. According to the official synopsis, the pressure on Spider-Man causes a surprising evolution of his physical being that threatens Peter's very life. Sony's official blurb also mentions a powerful new villain, and one can see it was directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. He most recently directed Marvel Studios' Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. Chris McKenna and Eric Summers wrote the film. The previous Holland Spider-Man films were also written by them. The official Sony credits list Kevin Feige, Amy Pascal, Avi Arad, and Rachel O'Connor as the producers. Peter Parker. Spider-Man once again portrayed by Tom Holland. Zendaya, who played MJ in the previous trilogy, is also confirmed to return to the Spider-Man franchise. Jacob Batalon is also confirmed to return, continuing his role after playing Ned Leeds. The film sees John Bernthal play Frank Castle, the Punisher, bringing the character to a Spider-Man theatrical feature in the MCU. Mark Ruffalo is back as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. Spider-Man, Punisher, and Hulk is a very different kind of power, anger, and responsibility that the film has. Sadie Sink is a part of the official cast, but Sony's main movie page does not publicly list her role. Trammell Tillman is also officially cast, and his role is protected by the marketing campaign. Confirmed cast includes Michael Mando. He played Matt Gargan in Spider-Man Homecoming previously. Matt Gargan's final Homecoming scene saw him leave with a personal grudge against Spider-Man and the desire to learn the hero's identity. Because the official Sony page lists Mando, but not the character's name, reports about the precise size or result of his role should be taken with caution until release. Brand New Day was announced officially in 2025 with the title. The title is fitting for a fresh start after the end of No Way Home, Tom Holland said. The title is also an allusion to a major period in Spider-Man comic book publication that began after the reality-altering events of One More Day. The comic Brand New Day period returned Peter to a struggling single status quo and introduced new conflicts, supporting characters and villains. The film plays with the title thematically, not promising a direct scene-by-scene adaptation of those comics. The MCU already had a reality-altering reset of its own when Doctor Strange's spell made everyone forget Peter Parker. The new red and blue suit sticks with the classic visual design teased at the end of No Way Home. The presentation of the last No Way Home suit as a creation of Peter's, following the loss of his support system, was a nice touch. A DIY costume visually distinguishes the new era from the stark design suits that defined much of Peter's early MCU career. The production commenced principal photography in August 2025. Early location filming was done in Glasgow, Scotland, with city streets dressed up as New York. The public location work gave fans a rare glimpse of Tom Holland in costume, and some practical street action. The production finished in December 2025. The first official trailer was released by Marvel on March 18, 2026. The trailer launch was part of a global campaign with fans and creators unveiling short pieces before Tom Holland unveiled the full trailer in New York. The trailer had more than 718 million views in its first day, Marvel reported, calling it a record-setting launch. It was in May 2026 that the official poster was released. The poster campaign played up the line that the world forgot Peter Parker, but Peter didn't forget them. Marvel also showed behind-the-scenes footage of Holland and Cretton talking about the opening action sequence of the film. Then, In June 2026, a trailer and ticket sales campaign. The Sony official movie page lists the film as action and adventure. Sony's credits the character to the Marvel comic book created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. The film was produced as a part of an ongoing partnership between Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures, Marvel Studios and Pascal Pictures. Spider-Man is anomalous in the MCU because of the film rights and distribution structure which Sony owns, but Marvel Studios has creative input in the shared universe films. Brand New Day follows the biggest box office hit of the Holland Spider-Man series. No Way Home. Holland's Peter joined forces with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in No Way Home. The marketing for Brand New Day shifts away from that multiversal reunion and refocuses attention on Holland's Peter living with the consequences. The 4-year leap forward in time. The new movie shows Peter as an adult, rather than immediately repeating the high school setup. It's a big shift for Peter's full-time crime-fighting status, partly because previous films have made a lot of money off the conflict between school, friendship, and superhero work. So the new movie has to create an ordinary life around Peter, instead of having the established school cast. The presence of the Punisher raises the possibility of a moral conflict about lethal force. Spider-Man has a long-standing policy of not killing, whereas the Punisher is a permanent punishment kind of guy. Hulk's existence creates a second moral and physical dilemma, since Bruce Banner knows what it is like to fear losing control of a changing body. The official synopsis emphasizes Peter's physical change, that it is probably more than just a cosmetic power-up. The invisible villain idea has a thematic connection with Peter's erased identity. Peter himself is socially invisible, and the new threat is literally or perceptually unseen. Spider-Man's danger sense is naturally useful against an enemy that can't be seen in the normal way. Spider sense became a necessity when Peter battled through Mysterio's illusions in Far From Home. Brand New Day can push that idea further and make perception part of the larger mystery. Cretton's time on Shang-Chi suggests a focus on action that expresses character and emotional conflict. Shang-Chi's best fights didn't just lean on interchangeable spectacle, but used buses, scaffolding, architecture and different movement styles. That approach suits Spider-Man, whose powers depend on vertical space, environmental improvisation and legible physical geography. Before he became Spider-Man, Tom Holland did dance and gymnastics, and his physical control has affected the movement of his version of Peter. The new film can depict Peter's physical development through shifts in movement before dialogue describes it. The challenge for McKenna and Summers is how to keep the emotional ending of No Way Home going without just undoing it. If all memory were restored immediately, Peter's sacrifice would be meaningless, and denying Peter relationships on a permanent basis would also diminish the human side of Spider-Man. So the dramatic question becomes not only whether people remember Peter, but whether he can dare to be known again. MJ and Ned have 4 years of life without conscious memories of Peter. And even if the memories do return, time cannot be turned back. What makes the film emotionally mature is that the reunion is treated as a new relationship, not as a mechanical restoration of the old. Peter's choice in the coffee shop in No Way Home was protective, but it was also unilateral. He kept them out of harm's way, but also took away their choice to decide for themselves by not telling MJ and Ned. Brand New Day may explore the difference between sacrifice and control. The new suit's classic look isn't just fan service. This is a Peter who has lost inherited technology and rebuilt the symbol himself. The street level of direction need not be small for the film. It needs the effects to stay linked to recognizable people and places. Hulk can be part of a street-level story if it impacts Peter and his local relationships and doesn't turn the film into a remote global event. The Punisher can show up in a Spider-Man story as long as the conflict is still about Peter's moral code and not a standalone Punisher movie. The movie has a large confirmed cast and will make focus one of the movie's main creative tests. The best use of guest characters is to complicate Peter's problem, not detract from it. Brand New Day isn't just another fourth part with the old structure. It's the start of a new chapter. The phrase Brand New Day is optimistic, but the official synopsis begins with isolation, pressure, and bodily danger. That contrast is probably deliberate. New beginnings are scary because they take away the habits that once made life understandable. Rent, jobs, school, and relationships often prevent heroism from becoming abstract in Spider-Man stories. Because Peter has been wiped from social memory, ordinary paperwork and identity systems could get very difficult indeed, even if the film only deals with part of that problem. The magic spell brings with it practical questions about records, education, and employment, but the precise rules have not been fully explained in public. A careful analysis should differentiate between those logical questions and confirmed plot points. The main invisible villain has not been identified in the official marketing. Online theories on the villain, Sadie Sink's character, surprise cameos, and the ending remain just theories until confirmed by the film or the studio. Sony's official page states that credits are not final, which is normal before the release. The film marks a long gap between Holland's solo Spider-Man films. No Way Home came out in 2021, and Brand New Day is slated for 2026. That gap in the real world makes the leap in time on screen feel natural. The film can show Peter's added experience without having the audience witness every patrol from the lost years. Health is not secured by experience. Peter might be a better Spider-Man, while a less whole Peter Parker. That contradiction is one of the most powerful dramatic ideas the movie has. Could this Spider-Man, Brand New Day work? First is consequence. No Way Home ended with one of the most emotionally brutal choices in the MCU. Peter saved reality by letting everyone forget about him. Brand New Day doesn't start out acting like the price was temporary. 4 years later, and Peter has constructed his life around the void. That gives the movie some weight before the new baddie shows up. The second reason is the return to Peter's scale. The multiverse was fitting for No Way Home, as the movie was about legacy, regret, and various versions of Spider-Man experiencing similar losses. If you repeat that scale, it's no longer unique. Brand New Day goes to New York, crime trends, a tailor-made suit, and a hero off his old network. The third reason is the physical change. New power isn't interesting by default, but power that threatens identity can turn action into character. What Peter's routine conceals, his body may expose. He's treated pressure like something to run from. The body can say no. Fourth is the enemy that is invisible. This idea fits right in with the emotional premise of the film. Peter is a man lost to time. The villain is an invisible threat. The city can see the damage the hero did, but not the enemy that caused it. Perception, reputation, and trust are part of the conflict. The fifth reason is the support character design. The Punisher and the Hulk aren't random. The story makes good use of them. Frank Castle is a mission that has eaten personal identity. Bruce Banner is a power, a body beyond the control of consciousness. Peter is caught in both risks. He has dedicated his life to the mission, and his body is changing. The sixth reason is Tom Holland gets to play an adult Peter Parker. His take on Spider-Man started with the childlike thrill of being noticed by the Avengers. He has chosen total anonymity, and so begins Brand New Day. The difference frees Holland to make the character quieter, more tired, and more deliberate without sacrificing the physical energy that defines him. Seventh reason, Destin Daniel Cretton. Cretton has proved family pain can propel action without falling back into exposition. And he knows too that fighting styles can be a form of expressing philosophy. Spider-Man, Punisher, and Hulk should all move differently because they all think differently. The eighth reason is the potential for the practical texture of the city. Location photography, real streets, and a big opening action sequence can make Spider-Man's movement feel connected to architecture again. The hero is more impressive when the audience knows the space he is saving. The ninth reason is the title's connection to Spider-Man history. Brand New Day equals a soft reset, but it also equals Peter's problems continuing in a new arrangement. The best Spider-Man stories don't give him a clean slate. It's a tough one. They give him another chance to choose who he will be. 10. The central lesson of the film doesn't have to be believe in yourself. Peter feels he must go on. His problem is perhaps that he believes the only responsible thing to do is to go on alone. The more useful lesson is that accepting help does not diminish responsibility. It makes responsibility responsible. The issue of overcrowding is the biggest issue. Spider-Man, MJ, Ned, Punisher, Hulk, Michael Mando returns, Sadie Sink, Trammell Tillman, and an invisible main villain, and Peter's transformation. There are a lot of moving parts. A movie about isolation can get lost in a parade of characters. The second concern is that the physical evolution becomes just a passing visual gimmick. The official synopsis uses strong language with emotional impact. If the change is fixed by a quick device without affecting Peter's understanding of himself, the premise will feel underused. The third problem is that the film erases No Way Home too easily. The previous ending was possible because Peter accepted a cost. Making it easy to get back all the relationships would make sacrifice a pause between sequels. The fourth problem is that the film makes Punisher's violence seem simply cool. Frank Castle can be engaging and charismatic, but Spider-Man's moral identity relies on there being an actual difference between them. Peter doesn't have to be the Punisher to prove he's grown up. Fifth, Hulk tends to take over the street-level story. A character of such vast scope can still work in an intimate film, but the action has to be based on Peter's choices. If destruction had no emotional implications, the local reset would seem cosmetic. The sixth point is mystery box storytelling. Secrecy can preserve surprise, but the film is to give the central villain a motive and presence beyond the audience doesn't know the name. Invisibility is not a full character, it is a concept. The seventh is nostalgia. MJ, Ned, Matt Gargan, the classic suit, can provide decent continuity. They shouldn't prevent the new chapter from bringing in relationships and conflicts that are strictly for adult Peter. The eighth concern is the balance between humor and grief. Spider-Man is meant to be funny. Peter should not act like 4 years of isolation don't matter. The film needs humor that comes from the characters, not jokes pasted over every awkward moment. The ninth is shared universe obligation. Brand New Day hasn't become valuable just because it sets up another Avengers movie. Even viewers who pay no heed to the larger franchise map have to count Peter's own choice in the end. The 10th issue is that the story confuses escalation with growth. A bigger body, a bigger fight, or a more secret villain doesn't make Peter more mature automatically. Growth is a change in his relation to responsibility, to memory, to other people. Last preview: Spider-Man, Brand New Day starts in the right place. Peter Parker saved the world at the expense of the world. 4 years later, the sacrifice is a lifestyle. He's not wearing a couple of faces. One of them has gone missing under his watch. The official synopsis says that this solution will fail inside his own body. Evolution is made by pressure. Evolution is a threat to existence. A hero who has spent all his time on Spider-Man may discover that Spider-Man can't live without Peter Parker. The unseen villain broadcasts the idea throughout the city. Peter is struggling against something that no one can see, while living as someone no one remembers. Public evidence might only show Spider-Man, destruction, and instability. The man with the mask has no social history. It's not necessarily less personal with the Punisher and the Hulk making the crisis bigger. Frank Castle demonstrates the consequences of making grief your life's mission. Bruce Banner demonstrates how power and identity not necessarily separate from each other. Peter has to rule out the worst possibilities in both mirrors. The emotional history is carried by MJ and Ned. Their return should not be a reward Peter earns after enough suffering. They are people whose lives did not stop. The most truthful story will allow love and friendship to have meaning without pretending that time can be undone without consequence. The future is carried by the new cast. Peter can't hang around forever, like a ghost haunting the old memories. New Day calls for relationships that start in the present. The direction by Destin Daniel Cretton. The return of McKenna and Summers, the classic suit, the practical street shooting and the mystery structure all suggest a Spider-Man movie that could be physically energetic and emotionally focused, but the film has to fight against its own bulk. The guest heroes, returning characters and hidden roles have to make Peter's crisis worse. Not the reason the movie exists. The most important image is not of Hulk smashing, Punisher firing, or an invisible villain appearing. It's Peter Parker in a city that knows Spider-Man, but doesn't know him. He can swing. For every web has an anchor. He can save strangers, because he believes all life has worth. Movement has always been easier than stillness. He can endure pain. What he cannot do, everlastingly, is remain unattached. That's the promise of the title. A new day is not a day without history. It is a day when history no longer decides everything. Peter has already shown that he is willing to die for those he cares about. Now he might have to learn the harder lesson. He has got to let a man live under the sacrifice. He must allow responsibility to include his own humanity. He has to become Peter Parker again, without ever ceasing to be Spider-Man. That's not a reset. That's progress. And if Spider-Man Brand New Day gets that difference, it could be the movie that finally gives Tom Holland's hero what the previous trilogy worked so long to prepare him for. Not Iron Man's pupil, not a child shielded by a team, not a sign in a multiverse, but friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He decides to connect. Friendly Fourth City's neighborhood is made of people and Spider-Man, because power only counts if Peter Parker is human enough to decide how to wield it.